First off, thanks to each of you for being here. Like Sridhar said, I'm super passionate about design, and any opportunity I get to speak about it is just an opportunity that I can't miss. So we're going to switch gears. This is just hopefully a fun presentation, something a little lighter than the discussion we've had so far. And so what are we talking about today, right? We're talking about persuasive design. Now, when we talk about persuasive design, the first question is, why is there so much conversation around design now, right? Because the industry's been there for a while, but suddenly in the last couple of years, maybe the last decade if you stretch it, there's been a lot more conversation, a lot more emphasis on design. Why is that, right? So that's something I want to dive into first. So design matters more than ever now. Why? So let's understand why by looking at a couple of industries, right? So this is a very quick snapshot of how the car industry, the automobile industry has evolved. Now, automobiles came out, towards the end of the 19th century, so between 1880 to 1920. That was when the first couple of automobiles came out, right? And 1920 is when the very first mass manufactured car came out. So that's the Ford Model T. You see the last car at the topmost row, the black one, that's the Ford Model T, right? So this was the era when automobiles came out and all the innovation was in technology. So, people are trying out different kinds of combustion engines, people are talking about different kinds of horsepower, they were laying down fundamental infrastructure like road networks, all that was happening and that took a good 40, 50 years to happen, right? So that's the first era. Then as time progressed, around the time when World War II happened, so between 1930s to 1950s, the industry evolved, right? To where you see cars in the second row. Again, you're seeing these cars are improvements on the cars in the first row, but they're still kind of similar. And then we have the modern era, which is the bottommost grid. Where today, if you look at cars, right, you can get a car in any flavor. You have sedans, you have hatchbacks, you have SUVs, you have station wagons or the equivalent, which is Innovas. You can get a car based on your personality, based on which color you choose, red, pink, blue, turquoise, teal, whatever you want, you can get a car, right? So that's the car industry. Let's look at another completely different industry. This is the smartphone industry. Now, if you guys remember, and I'm sure all of you remember, in the early 2000s, up until 2007, this is what the industry looked like. Again, you could get a phone in any color, any shape. You had flip phones, you had oval-shaped phones, you had phones which would open horizontally. I used to have a Nokia N-Gage. Just random quick show of hands. Who else has heard of or had an N-Gage? Okay, wow, that's a lot of you. And if you guys have heard of it, you remember what that phone is like, right? So to answer a call on the N-Gage, I would have to hold it like this. Literally, it looks like a big ear is sticking out of my very awkward phone. But the point is, you could get a phone for any different use case, right? This changed, though, when Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007, right? That's when Apple basically introduced something that was substantially different from a technology point of view. But up until here, around 2007, the industry had matured and design had taken over because, for any particular person's need, it was design that was convincing him to buy into that particular product. So what's common between these two industries, right? So this is a simplified curve. There are, fancier versions of this. But essentially, if you take any industry, it goes through a curve where initially, right, some kind of breakthrough technology happens. That technology goes through a gestation period. It improves, it improves, and it keeps improving, right? So that's the period when, you see that period marked as new and improving at the very bottom. After a while, it starts maturing because, the advancement in technology kind of start tapering off, comes, less and less frequently. And towards the very end, there's a decline, right? Now, most industries are in the maturity phase, where in terms of technology, you're seeing improvements, but they're mostly along, similar lines. And when that happens, differentiation starts moving to other kinds of things. Price, which, we heard a lot about today. Customer service, we heard a lot about today. And there's design, right? Design is basically catering a product to a particular human being's needs, right? And that starts mattering more, right? And the reason I wanted to do this kind of an introduction is because we've seen this has happened in the past for smartphones. I believe it's again happening for smartphones, again consolidating. This has happened for cars. It has happened for your industry as well. And it's extremely important for all of you guys to recognize the value of design and the kind of value add you can add to design. So, now talking about persuasion, the fundamental base of persuasion is creating something that has good design. After that, we'll talk in this presentation about other kinds of levers you guys can employ to create behavior change. But the very base is you need to create a product with great design, right? So what does great design look like, right? Let's start by looking at something that is not great design. Again, something all you guys have used. Microsoft Word, okay, have you guys ever tried expanding all the toolbars? So to a new user, right, Microsoft Word is very, very overwhelming. Now don't get me wrong, Microsoft Word is a phenomenal product. So as a product manager, I completely love the kind of innovation they put in the product. But at some point in that, the evolution of the product, it just got really, really complicated. And it became that, right? So the last time I counted, so I counted because I couldn't find stats for this on the internet. I actually counted every feature. This one software has more than 250 plus features. That's insane if you think about it, because think about it, right? Essentially for a software that's supposed to help you put your thoughts and save your thoughts, that's the end goal really. You have 250 plus features, right? And somewhere along the way, it got really complicated. Here's a fun fact, right? Microsoft Research actually did this exercise where they called customers into their offices, customers of Microsoft Word, and they asked them, okay, in fact, the product management did it, so it's my tribe that did this exercise. What features do you guys want to see in the next edition of Microsoft Word? And here's what happened. Over 90% of the features that customers said they wanted were already in Word. Okay, now that's really, really ironic, because here customers are saying, I want these features, but they're already in Word, right? So there's a huge, huge discovery problem with Microsoft Word. This, in fact, directly led to the development of the Ribbon, which is the latest interface that you guys are using. Again, I personally love the product for the kind of challenges it took on, but at some point it became really, really complicated. So what is not good design, right? So if you break it down, good design is not simply adding features the moment you think of it. You have to question, deeply question every single feature, because every single feature you add, right, there is a cost to it, and that cost is cognitive load for your user. You might not realize it because it's actually, we've reached a stage where it's easier to build features, right, than not to build features. And it's important that everybody takes hard calls. So simply adding more features does not lead to good design. Simply adding more settings. Every time a customer comes, this is really important to you guys. Every time a customer comes, and if you have a product, try to resist the urge to basically introduce a separate customization for that one customer. Because while you might get the revenue from that customer, it's going to come back and add complexity for your customers at large, the entire group of them. More use cases. Again, take very, very hard calls on which use cases you want to cater to. What is good design? So this is an app that does really well in the US. Some of you might have already seen or heard about this. This is Square Cash. Square is a player in the payment space in the US. They try to make it simple for users to pay merchants. So instead of a merchant investing X amount of money in a traditional POS setup, and it's called an EDC machine, but that's a device on which you swipe a card, Square provides them a simplified mobile-based way to accept money. On the user's end, again, Square provides users also a way to basically add their money and transfer it from one friend to another friend. Look at the screen, right? So this is a dedicated app they launched, which is supposed to do just two things. Allow me to basically send money to you, and allow me to ask you to send me money. Again, there's no ambiguity on the screen. You land on the screen, you know that you're expected to enter money, and there's only one question asked of you. Do you want to ask the other person for money or send money to the other person? Again, this is something where it's easier to, it's actually really easy for the product team to have cluttered the screen up, right, by adding X number of use cases. They've done the hard job of looking at exactly how users might use this app and saying no to a whole bunch of things. So they've said yes to the 20% of use cases that will give 80% of value. And we see this on and off. It's a principle that's often abused, but at least in product management, it holds true to a large extent. A few use cases are really the ones that most customers want. And if you do a great job in just those, the 20% of use case, you've got that customer on board. This is another way to describe great design. So this is, in fact, he's a VC with something called Redpoint Ventures in the US. Really, really smart chap. When I came across this tweet, I fell in love because, for the longest time, there was this thing about, okay, how do I define great design, right? And this thing hit it for me. Great design, I completely agree with this, is telepathic. It's like that friend who, that friend knows what you're thinking and directly answers to, whatever's on your mind. That's great design, right? From a human point of view. If your UI, if your software can do that, where a user has a particular intent, comes on it, and doesn't have to struggle to basically express his intent, he just finds what he's looking for. That's great design, right? And what leads to this? Again, thinking through use cases, taking hard calls, saying no. That's what great design is about.